Well, welcome back to Destination Aviation. I'm your host, Jeff Miller. I'm working on my cameras, as you can tell. We have a great conversation today with Erin O'Donnell. She has an extensive history in aviation, used to run the Midway Airport as, what is it, a square mile of an airport? I'm probably getting that wrong. I'm saying it on the fly, but it's something like that. It's an airport within a community, but we'll get right into that conversation. Well, Erin, welcome to Destination Aviation.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me today.
No, I've been looking forward to this conversation. A mutual friend, colleague, someone in our life, Wendy.
Yes.
She had connected us, and your background seems pretty impressive. I know you're doing some other stuff now within aviation. Is it in aviation space or is it in? Okay. And we'll get into all that. But maybe up front, we could just talk a little bit about your history, what brought you into aviation. I know we talked briefly before we started, and you have a little connection to Chicago Executive Airport getting your pilot's license, but always love to hear how people got into our industry.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me on the podcast. I feel my entire career has been Destination Aviation, and I'm really grateful that the lovely and talented Wendy Abrams connected us.
She is very lovely, and you worked together, right?
We did. We worked together at the Department of Aviation for a period of time, and have remained connected because she's such a talented and dynamic woman that I'm appreciative that she's in my network and in my world.
Is that, so for the listeners who we have, it's split, depends on the episode, but Department of Aviation, Chicago Department of Aviation, right?
That is correct. The Chicago Department of Aviation.
And so maybe how did you end up with the Chicago Department of Aviation? What started your career, and did you have an aha moment, or did you just stumble into it, or how did this all come about for you?
I did. And so reflecting back on over 30 years in aviation, I started in aviation when I was 16 years old. And I was an intern at Chicago Midway International Airport. I was the airport's first intern. And that internship came about because my mother thought I needed a job. And so she was coerced with my high school counselor, and they got me into the internship program with the city of Chicago, and I was randomly assigned to Midway Airport.
How old were you?
16.
Congratulations. I don't know if I know someone I started 16, but just a job paint hangers, but an actual internship. I guess kudos to Chicago, because usually you run into that barrier. Oh, are they over 18? But they didn't have that barrier, huh?
Not back then.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Maybe today.
There is a barrier today.
Is it a barrier? Okay.
But back then there wasn't. And so that really started my love of aviation. I grew up near Midway Airport, born and raised in the city of Chicago to two immigrant parents. My parents were both immigrants from Ireland. And so they instilled in my brothers and I a strong work ethic. So that's why my mother was very interested in me getting a job at 16. But not any job would do, right? And so she wanted it to be something that would be supportive of some type of future career. So she was very much ahead of her time with respect to, raising my brothers and I. And so I'm forever grateful that she put me on this path. I was reluctant to get on the path, but it has been wonderful. It has really opened opportunities and doors. And so I was fortunate enough to work through high school and college on summer breaks, on Christmas breaks. Midway brought me back anytime I had the opportunity. So when I graduated, the summer before I graduated college, I had a job offer from one of the big 6 accounting firms. I got my undergraduate degree in accounting, and I was all set, finished my senior year, and then I was going to go work for one of the big 6 accounting firms. But then I met Paul McCartney.
Oh, the Sir Paul McCartney, or a different Paul McCartney?
Sir Paul.
Okay.
He was on tour himself through Chicago. And at the time, and I have not usually shared this story.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing with us.
Paul McCartney is the real reason why. My mother and Paul McCartney are the reasons why I'm in aviation.
The Wings? That would have been that time period.
So
right?
I don't
Wasn't
remember.
that his band, Wings?
It was, but I'm not sure which tour it was on. It was so long ago, Jeff. But when celebrities at that time came to town, there was a whole host of police officers that supported their security while they were in the city, and they were all lined up right by his plane. And most celebrities that were of good nature would walk the line and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I was standing next to the police commander of the airport at the time. And Paul said to me, who are you? Like, where's your uniform? And I was like, well, I'm just the intern. I was all doe-eyed and excited. And he said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And at the time, I wanted to be president of the United States.
Not
And I said
small
that,
goal, but
and I said that to him, and he said, "Well, I better give you a hug now because when you are president of the United States, this won't happen."
that's awfully nice of him.
And so that experience, and I thought to myself, gosh, I could maybe meet Paul McCartney as his auditor, but probably not.
Probably
Maybe
not.
I should stick with this aviation gig and see
Wow.
what happens. And so I was able, the city was, I was blessed that the city hired me
Yeah.
after I graduated from university, and I worked different positions at Midway Airport, both in operations and landside and security, really learned how airports operated. And then in 1993, moved to a position at O'Hare in the real estate division to understand the financial part of the airports, the lease agreements, and our relationships with our stakeholders and our tenants. And then in 1997, Mary Rose Loney was Commissioner of Aviation,
Yes.
who was an important mentor to me throughout my entire career. And an opportunity came up to lead Midway. And so in 1997, I went to Midway Airport as the deputy commissioner, and I was fortunate enough to spend 22 years managing the world's busiest square mile in aviation and lead the most dynamic and talented team and the airport through $2 billion of capital improvements. And then I retired in 2019 because I hit the pension lottery, right?
Yeah, right. All right. Well, there's a lot to unpackage there. But I'm going to start back with, so when your mom initially pushed you, I'm going way back. When your mom pushed you into this, was it because it was the city, or did she have some affection towards aviation, or was it literally get a job, the city would be a good place to start, or was there anything in her head?
I think it was more focused on something that would give a career path.
Okay.
It wasn't working at,
Right.
McDonald's or something.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
Yeah.
she wanted something that had a long-term career path.
Right.
We lived in the community around Midway.
Sure.
And so it was,
Made sense.
it was in our backyard. And so the opportunity to work in a dynamic environment that was so close to home was attractive to her.
Okay.
And she also knew I wouldn't do,
Yeah.
I had a whole set of criteria, like, okay, I'll get a job, but I'm not going to do fast food. I'm not doing not.
Right.
And so, I'm forever grateful though that she
Yeah.
had the vision and
No,
she
no,
saw, because
Yeah.
it really opened the door. It opened the opportunities. I didn't know of all the careers that exist in aviation. And I think that most general people in the general public just think it's your pilot and flight attendant,
Right.
super important roles and careers.
Absolutely.
But there's a whole, as we all know, there's a whole network and infrastructure
Oh, yeah.
and team that work in front of in passenger facing, but also then behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that was what really opened my eyes to all the opportunities.
Was there, and I apologize if I misheard this, but I think you said early on when you were in this, before Paul McCartney, which of course, Paul McCartney, if he got off a dump truck, I'd be like, okay, I'm going into waste management. That's the way to go. So before Sir Paul McCartney convinced you, you said you had a little bit of hesitation. You sounded like you were going into the finance side. What kind of, at least, so you were doing an internship, maybe I heard it wrong, don't remember all of it, but if you had what was some of the trepidation of maybe the career path before you were like, yeah, this is where I want to go? Was there?
I think it was more predictable for me. It was
Okay.
safe. I got my degree in accounting. So
Okay.
the safer route was to get a position in that
The
field.
top 6 companies?
Because
Yeah.
in having a career and opportunity with one of the top 6 companies, there was definitely runway ahead of me there. But honestly, it was really, once you get bitten by the smell of jet fuel and being in the dynamic environment of airport, anyone who's been out on the ramp or walked through the terminal buildings, you know how exciting it is. And I really, that summer before I graduated university, really set the stone, like, do I want to do an office job, or do I want to be in an environment like this where I don't know where it's going to take me? I don't know the path ahead, but I definitely know it's going to be exciting. And so, and you might meet a celebrity along the way, right?
You just might. It's funny because you mentioned the line, the shaking it. There's snippets, and listen, I get, a celebrity's a celebrity 100% of the time, and they might have missteps here and there. But in my career, you meet some people that are just so nice and gracious, and they don't have to be necessarily. To us especially, they don't have to be. And then there are some you're like, oh no. And it's funny because there are, at this point in my career, so this is year 25 for me in aviation, I've hit a point where I'm like, if I really like someone, I don't know if I want to meet them, because I'm like, if they're not the nice person, then it would kind of ruin it for me.
Right.
You know?
You want to keep the image.
I want to keep the image of that
Yes.
they're a nice person. And so it has altered and shifted in my mind a little bit. But so, okay, so you met Sir Paul McCartney. You decided to stay in aviation. So through that time, I mean, you talked about basically your whole history up to the last moment. And I'll say kudos, one, to what you did at Midway, because I'll just be honest. When I was younger and I would go through Midway, the first time I went Midway, I was like, oh my God, I'm not coming back here again. It is packed. And not just really a fault of you're busy, you're successful. It was just purely, it was wall to wall people.
Yes.
And then through your transition, it became a preference. It's like, oh, how can I go through Midway in Southwest, you know? And so kudos to what you did there, because I think it did, you know, it turned it completely around. And people haven't been in there in a while. I'm like, you should go and give Midway a try. It's like, it's completely changed. So nice job on what you did there.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's the vision of Mayor Daley and Commissioner Mary Rose Loney. I was fortunate to be on the team on the implementation.
You probably played a big role, I would think.
But if you think about the old terminal building was built in 1947.
Yeah.
It was built for 2 million passengers. At the time we demolished it, we had 10 million passengers running through the facility.
Yes.
And so there are people that still yearn and long for the old Midway terminal because of its convenience. I think that we took that convenience factor into the new terminal building and the large scale that it has, but really presented opportunities for growth into the future, because surprising to most, the airfield wasn't the restricting capacity at the time at Midway. It was the terminal building, because it was designed in it was built in 47, designed for 2 million passengers. The terminal building was what was constricting growth and capacity, not the airfield. And so we really built a terminal building that could balance the airfield capacity. And I think now it's just a wonderful terminal facility. I think that it is easy to navigate. It's very intuitive. It is attractive. It's easy to maintain. And it's a really great welcome to the city of Chicago.
It really is. And it's, I love, because it didn't, like I said, it was really a victim of its own success, at least from the outside when I looked at it, and what it morphed into to your leadership, the other folks you spoke about. It has, and it's nice to see that shift, because, sometimes it doesn't always happen, but you recognize it. But also too, where my day job is, we're in a similar fashion, as you can see the aerial behind our lovely cameras here, urban sprawls all around us.
Yeah.
And so this not as the same as the busiest square mile, but we're busy in our own right, and there's nowhere to go. So everything that we have here, we have to look at and say, okay, how do we plug and place and move around and change? And, you have to make tough decisions. We just decommissioned a runway. As an aviation champion, I would always say it would be the last thing I would want to do, but sometimes it's like, makes the most sense, right? And in this case, it makes the most sense. And I think even at Midway, and so probably after your time, but they just decommissioned the center runway.
The 31 right is now, yes, exactly. But again, highest and best use of limited assets is really what the decision making is.
Right.
As you say, no one in aviation wants to.
Right.
But if there was a change in use of pavement that gives greater flexibility and greater capacity to the airfield, that's what it's really about. And there are going to be people that agree and people that disagree with decisions that you make.
Yeah.
As long as you go into it with the best positive intent and there's an outlook. And I think also one thing that was really important to me during my tenure at Midway was being a good neighbor, right? We're located in the middle of a community. I wanted to put a face on the airport, that it wasn't this sort of mysterious group of people.
Yes.
But that, myself as someone who grew up near the airport, that, I understand what it's like to live adjacent to an airport. And we wanted to be good neighbors, not only with our policies, but also in the way we maintained our property.
Yeah.
So green spacing and using landscaping and making sure, with our sound attenuation projects that we had, that we're being a good neighbor to the community around Midway.
Yeah, I think that's 99% of the battle, right? And I love that that's what you say, because I try to do that in my day job as well. And, most of the time, I hear some people in our industry, not most are really good about engaging with the community, but there's this thought process sometimes of, I don't know, they're going to yell, I'm not going to get involved with it. But most people don't know, and why would they? They don't know how an airport works.
Right.
They don't know the city's role, or like in our case, a commission with two communities. what that level is, how much control they have over it versus the federal government. And so most of the time I find there's some edification that goes along with these conversations, and you become a low paid therapist because usually when you start talking to someone, there's an external factor that has happened of why they're upset. Maybe it's about noise or whatever it might be, but you start talking to them and they're like, well, I just retired, or maybe they were laid off or whatever it might be. And now they're at home at different hours and they're hearing, different patterns of noise, and noise is very subjective to the listener. And so I find if you give most people a little grace, a little bandwidth, a little opportunity, maybe to start with a little bit of yelling for them to you and then explain, most people will come along. I still have a list of people that tell me they're going to put the airport up my butt, but I'll get through to them maybe someday or not.
I think that at the core of every human relationship is communication, right? The wanting to be heard, validating of feelings. I honestly feel that I've learned a lot from engaging with our community, both our business community to understand the importance of the airport has to their business, but also our residential community, right?
Yeah.
We started obviously the noise insulation program, both in schools and residences, and very proud of what the city has accomplished there, but also, the portable noise monitoring program came out of listening to the community, right? That maybe our noise monitors, they felt weren't in the right position. So deploying a portable asset adjacent to your home could give that community resident, validation of the data that was coming through the airport noise monitoring system. If we weren't listening to the community, that enhancement, that improvement never would have existed. And so being open to listening and engaging and communicating the facts, because airports are complex and there are multiple layers and there are restrictions that are in place from a federal guidance perspective, but also from a local governance perspective. And so being able to explain the story, I think really addresses a lot of the concerns. And so when I came to the airport in 1997, it was really important for me to get out in the community, talk to the schools, talk to the business groups, talk to the residential groups. So number one, so they could understand what we were doing with our new terminal development program, because there was going to be a lot of construction in the area and that was going to be impacting the community, but also that it could see the vision of what we were building and really get excited about. And the community was excited about the terminal program and has continued to be. And so it's just wonderful. I mean, we also, through that community engagement, started an airport ambassador program where we took residents from the community to volunteer at the airport.
Where do you go? All right. So, technical difficulties on Jeff Miller's part, but so far it's just one technical difficulty, which has been way better than the last two episodes that I've had. But we were talking about your past and where I guess I want to kind of connect, because we're just talking about noise and noise monitoring. And you said 1997. In 1997, you were at Midway. 1992 is when you met Sir Paul McCartney, right?
1990.
Okay, so 1990. So for that.
Thank you for dating me, Tim.
I'm sorry, but I'm just in my own. I was going to be a compliment, because I was going to say, so over 7 years, were you running Midway at that point, or you were high up at Midway?
I was running Midway in 1997.
Wow, so 7 years. Congratulations. It was going towards a compliment. That's why I was trying to line up.
Let's try that. Let's start over.
Yeah, let's start over. So Paul McCartney. Now, was this when he was on Ed Sullivan?
Okay, let's edit that out.
Let's roll that out. He looked like that, so he would have been a young chap in the 90s. But that's pretty quick though. That's 7 years to run one of the largest airports in the country. Kudos.
I'm very determined. And I was surrounded by great mentors, which I think is something that's been important to me. Mary Rose Loney was a great mentor, Sue Bear, Gina Marie Lindsay, Bonnie Allen, this host of women that were, paving the way in leadership roles at airports around the country. And mentorship, just along with internships, have been a huge part of what I hope my legacy is in aviation, because they were the reason that I was able to have the career that I have. And so being able to give back. And so we always, had internship programs at the airport that were run through the city, and bringing as many students through those programs as possible to inspire them to pursue careers in aviation.
It's interesting on our part here. I think besides the Chicago Department of Aviation umbrella, we're the only other state, at least actively right now, that has a residential sound insulation program.
Yes.
But you mentioned something that was unique to me, and for the listeners that are a part of aviation, you mentioned the remote sound unit. Is it like literally like a microphone that you give to a resident, or is it in a van driving around picking up sound? I'm just curious. What?
So the Chicago Department of Aviation has noise monitoring systems at both Midway and O'Hare, and they were permanently installed at designated points to correlate with flight paths of aircraft to capture the most noise impact. But residents, as we were going out and sharing the noise contour, explaining the noise contour, explaining how the inputs to how it works through the model, there were some skeptics, and maybe rightly so. And so the idea came up of having portable monitors that could be affixed to a light pole in the vicinity of a resident or a block.
Okay.
That could then could gather data for a certain period of time to be able to validate the results of the official noise contour noise monitoring system. And so it was complementary towards that and really meant to sort of address the concerns, right? A resident would say, well, okay, that noise monitor is 4 blocks away from me, but the noise is different at my house. And rather than saying, no, it's not, because here's all the technical data, what came out of the listening to the community was, well, let us, if the technology was there, let us deploy portable monitors so that we could say specifically in this block away or 6 blocks away from a noise monitor, here's the noise data for this specific geographical area, was really helpful in communicating with residents. And also, we knew the data was accurate. We knew the noise model was FAA approved and we were in full compliance with it. But sometimes it's about listening to the residents and then figuring out a way to address their concerns. And sometimes, as you point out, we may never have addressed the concern, but I think the more objective data that we could bring to those discussions, the better that they were.
No, because I think a lot of times, and I love the thought process you have around noise, because I do think it becomes kind of a circular thing for a resident, because there is a lot of this that happens if it goes the wrong way, right? And, as I always butcher noise, a bondsman office, whatever that word is, but with the FAA. But if you contact the office, what I have found in my time is usually it goes up through the FAA and then eventually comes back down to the airport. And so, as we've talked about here, we've talked about in this podcast before, the airport has very little control over any of that. They don't control the airspace. And when you look at things like FAR 36 and requiring aircraft to get quieter, usually noise contours shrink. And I have found more recently too, the FAA has gone away from noise monitoring at all with noise contours and really focus more on 12-month traffic. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
this was back in the day.
Well,
how these programs started, right? And the investment, as you mentioned, that the industry has made on being good neighbors, both with the improvements in the technology of the engine, the sound insulation programs in both schools and homes. I mean, at Midway, we have residences across the street from the airport. And so, being a good neighbor was paramount to the city of Chicago, right?
Yeah.
We didn't want the friction with the community, right? We wanted them to understand that we were trying to be good neighbors. We were trying to, invest and grow the economic asset that is an airport and all of the economic benefit that comes from a strong, healthy airport. Look around the community around Midway from the 90s to where it is today, the level of investment that's happened both commercially with industrial manufacturing, but also, all of the hotels that are located now south of the airport, that commercial activity would have not happened had the airport not been successful and healthy. And so that entire ecosystem has to be functioning well. And a lot of that has to do with our airline partners. I mean, Southwest Airlines, Midway is blessed to have Southwest Airlines as its anchor tenant. We couldn't have a better partner. And Chicago is blessed to have, the dual hub airport at O'Hare and the hub that Southwest has at Midway. You can get to anywhere in the world.
That's fantastic.
From Chicago. And when you don't find a nonstop, you're always like, how is that possible? Right. You can get anywhere from Chicago.
Right.
And we're really fortunate to live in this area because many other large cities don't have that flexible. I think New York is probably maybe the most comparable to us with their airport infrastructure, the New York region. But I think really, we're very we really reap the benefits of having a very dynamic airport system in Chicago.
And Chicago Executive Airport slides in there too.
For sure. For sure. An important role, right?
9 flight schools.
Well, but also not only the future through the flight schools, but also the corporate aviation and the general aviation. But it is an ecosystem, and all of the components need to be working together.
And borrowed your name. We're Chicago adjacent.
Exactly.
No, I was leaning towards too with that comment about noise monitoring. It's interesting to me because I understand probably some of the FAA's perspective, because we do hear it a lot. Well, I think in the ones I've been in the past, if it was like the bona fide noise testing, it was like 7 locations, and you had residents in Elwood here. But so I love the creativeness of adding in something that could satisfy that, because you do hear it. And it kind of reverse what I've seen the FAA do is say, okay, well, let's just not do it at all. Let's just look at the traffic that comes in. So I love, because you guys seem like you found a solution to some of that comment of, well, you should at least do something near my residence. I mean, I think that's really cool, because it's something dynamic and something above and beyond that, I think does make a good partner. And I'm going to say too, there was a podcast I did in your parking garage at Midway. And it was with AOPA and Aircraft Owner Pilot Association. Not for you. I knew you knew it, for the people listening, but AOPA, and they were going to come here and do it. But we're probably on a good day about an hour from Midway. It's ain't a good day. And a bad day, well, anyone's guess on a bad day. And it was, the flight was delayed coming out of Minneapolis. And so said, well, let's just, I'll do it in the garage. We'll do it in the garage. And so we hooked up the microphones in the car and we recorded in the garage. I paid, I think, 4 hours of short-term parking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting me stay in the garage. But it was, and it got me, I went in and met him down in baggage claim and stuff, and just reminded me what a phenomenal job you guys did down there.
Oh, thank
to
you.
get into such an asset.
Yeah, it really was the vision of Mayor Daley and Commissioner Mary Rosaloni that they saw that there was more opportunity. And we had great partnership with Southwest Airlines and all the airlines at Midway, really understanding that level of investment. And I think that the airport is better because of that investment. I think that it has given the opportunity for new airlines to come into the marketplace, to grow, because we have the facilities and they're no longer a competitive barrier to entry, right? You have the facilities available, you have gates available, you have common use gates, you have common use ticket counters. So the infrastructure is there to really handle the growth and really, present the point-to-point service that Midway is known for.
You had mentioned, you became commissioner of Midway in 1997, and then I believe you said you retired in 2017 or 2019?
2019.
2019. So from 1997 to 2018, you were commissioner of Midway.
Correct.
So kudos and congratulations, because at a city-run airport, the reality of life, and I say this in my role, is you get new elected leaders in, things, but it shows something I think probably really special about you and what you can do in your job, because you lasted multiple mayors, multiple administrations. And so no easy feat. So I'll say that. You may not be able to say it, but I'll say that, because I see somebody who runs, especially a city running airport, that has such a tenure. I think it's a testament to the job and your character of what you do.
Well, thank you for that. I really have been blessed to work for all of the three. I worked for 3 different mayors, 11 commissioners of aviation, and I had just a fantastic team. That was what also made the job. I mean, I loved that job. I would go to work every day.
You can tell on your face.
Yeah, I really did love that job. It was really a blessing to me. I think I got more from it than I ever gave to it. And so it was really a blessing. The people that I met, the dynamic team that I got to work with, that really made my job so much easier, because I was smart enough to hire people to my weaknesses and that were really experts in their field. And so the sum of us as a whole were really productive and really delivering more. And again, great partners, whether it was with the airlines, with Southwest or with our federal partners, FAA and TSA, really the ecosystem, I think, coming together and really trying to do the best. I mean, most people, when they come to work, they want to do a good job, right?
Oh yeah.
I was the same way. I wanted to go to work and I wanted to do a good job. And I had a job that I loved, and I loved it for over 30 years. The Chicago Department of Aviation was very good to me. And I hope I gave back a little bit to the department.
No, it's I'll say as an independent observer, I'm going to say yes. But I'll also say, it's funny because in our industry, there is so many, I don't know if silo is the right word, but I would say silo. And what I mean by that is they're not within your chain of command. And so when you're in a role like running an airport, you talk to people, oh, demand they do. You can't demand. You can't demand the air traffic controllers do something. You can't demand CBP do something. You can ask and you can work and you can get to some maybe agreement. But I love your messaging because I think, in this industry, and I've said it here, we're in a block grant state. CEA was outside of that, so you have to deal as much with the state, and rightfully so. You're so busy, but like in our case, even through all the frustrations, I'm like, I don't think anybody ever wakes up in our industry and is like, how can I make it worse today? How could I possibly make this situation any worse?
Yeah.
So most people start with good intentions. And so it's like, okay, how do we find some common ground? But how do you feel? I just saw it in the news and I thought it was always interesting. We talked about Southwest a lot, but through COVID, it seemed like it gave an opportunity for them to pop into the O'Hare market. Now they're departing the O'Hare market. You mentioned, the three airlines, Chicago, and I agree, and it's one of as someone who's a transplant to your community, I don't remember, actually I do. I remember the last time I connected and it was with AOPA to Buckeye, Arizona. And I ran and ran because my connection was late through Houston. But we're so fortunate with both airports. We don't have to your point earlier, but do you feel like that? What was that? Do you think that they wanted some market at O'Hare to test maybe a catchment area they weren't getting, or just to complement Midway? Or are you going to say, Jeff, I can't talk about it at all, which is fine?
Well, I think that Southwest, as with all of our airline partners, right?
Yeah.
They're very strategic. They're very smart. They have a long-term vision. And I think it's great that Chicago offers the opportunity for them
Yeah.
to come into markets and to try and to adjust as necessary, right? I think that's what the Chicago Department of Aviation strength is, right? That we're the partners for our airline partners, right? We're there to be there and to support what their strategic goals are, not to tell them what their strategic goals are, because that's not our lane. It's to be able to be supportive of their implementation. And what's great is that I've been able to leverage all of that experience and all of that knowledge into what I'm doing now with HighServe North America, which is a ground support equipment leasing company.
Oh, it is? Okay.
And so HighServe has been in existence in 10 years in Europe. They have over 14,000 assets. And obviously, North America is a huge market for them to grow into. And building on the successful platform that they had in Europe, we launched into North America in March of this year. And so being able to take all of the experience that I had at the Department of Aviation and seeing the ecosystem that is the airport and how all of the pieces fit together and really working towards a common goal, taking that now to GSE leasing to say to airlines and ground handlers and airports, there's a better way to manage your ground support equipment. There's a better way to manage that capital and let us be your partner in looking at those long-term solutions.
So what was the name of the company again?
HighServe North America.
HighServe North America. And it's the ideology is you have a ground service equipment, so tow bars, tugs, lab carts.
Anything you see out on the ramp, we have all the way from your dollies all the way up to your de-icers and everything in between. And we own the assets, and we either will rent them or long-term lease them to customers, but also taking a look at different financial solutions. If you're looking to monetize your fleet in order to fund capital for other investments, being able to be your partner there. So it's really a spectrum of options that we have, from a short-term rental to get you through a gap or get you through a peak season where you need an additional asset because you're in your busy winter or summer season, or all the way to, long-term leasing and providing your fleet for the long-term over, 5 to 7 year period of time.
It's interesting because I had just heard, I was talking to some of the airports in Illinois, and the FAA has put a cap on the amount of traffic at O'Hare now.
Yes.
But even with that, with the schedules that United and American are showing, some of the airports around Illinois that are close within the Chicago region have been getting hundreds and thousands of dollars of ground service equipment just showing up to support diversions.
Yes.
When it comes. So, in our market on this side, and I would assume a place like Midway, the ground support predominantly Southwest, right?
Yes.
They probably own all their equipment, right?
They own the majority of their equipment, right? But there are other, when you're on a limited footprint airport, right? Optimizing that ramp is key. And so I think what airports are now seeing is that we can pool those GSE resources because we don't need to keep on a common use gate, for example, we don't need to be cycling through the same set of GSE to process a 737 because it is the same pushback or similar pushback, the same bag loaders. It's the assets, the ground support assets are similar, but the ownership is different. And so because, each airline or each ground handler has their own assets, really taking a step back and saying, wait, if we pooled this, and we had one set of ground support equipment for a gate. And even, supporting their ESG initiatives and having electric ground support equipment to support those ESG initiatives in place would be, a better strategy for the airport to use to support their commercial airline partners.
No, I definitely could see the space it serves. I know, so like the Moline Airport, they take it because they, obviously they're not a hub or anything like that. But they have, all the alphabet soup of airlines. They've taken upon themselves as an airport to manage ground service for the airlines. And so I do see that market there. And I purchased something just at this airport recently. But one that sticks in my mind is when I was at Pittsburgh, Qatar Airways. Yes, coming in, and they had a 777.
Yes.
And it was cargo. And they needed a cable and they needed a tug. And it's just trying to find. And at that time, I don't know if there was a leasing option available. This was a decade plus, but we ended up purchasing everything outright. And the numbers would ever make sense.
And that's really where a High Serve North America would come in and be the partner there to fill that gap, not only with the assets, but also then the financial, access to capital. At every airport, regardless of size, there's always more demand for capital than there is capital. And so having a partner like High Serve North America come in and be able to not only provide the assets, but to provide the right financing solutions for you is really the great solution. Well, and leasing in the United States has not been as prominent as it's been in Europe. So one of the goals of High Serve North America is really to elevate and increase the amount of leasing that's done in the United States.
No, and what I was going to say there is I do think that there's that space for it, because I know there after my time in Pittsburgh ended, that flight ended, and now you have very expensive cable loader, very expensive tug, and so again, I could see where this space makes sense. And so your role in that, your position in that, are you making those connections, assessments? Do you go all the way down? Like a perfect example would be here, we bought a minimal equipment. We manage a hangar, probably begrudgingly, but we manage it, and aircraft can be towed out. We bought a small unit for $25,000. To do that. Is that a market space you're in? Are you looking larger, multi?
Oh, absolutely. Right. We're looking to our first focus for the first half of the year, because we just started business in March.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Is looking to our ground handler and airline partners, which is the model that exists in Europe. And then the second half of the year is really focusing on outreaching to airports of all sizes, because I honestly think your small and medium hub airports and non-hub airports have more of a demand because the access to capital is more limited. They also have strong ESG initiatives. The electrification of assets is important, but finding out a solution without having the available capital is something that we really are focused on and targeting on.
And assuming the website.
Yes.
I will add that to the show notes for everybody watching and mostly listening. Go and check out your website. But I'm glad to hear this, because I do, as just someone who's been in this space, it's a huge decision point, right? If you're buying, like in our case here, perfect example, right? We're taking back over a hangar, and we had a tenant that was using the tons, fixed base operator that left with it. And, we brought in another person to do it, but they don't have the equipment. Now we got to buy one. And so you're on, government surplus website somewhere trying to find a tug.
Just call.
There you go.
We'll take care of it. We'll take care of it from there,
Next
right?
time,
We
yes.
have the assets. We can get them here and deployed as quick as you need them.
Well, that's good. So you guys have a pretty good inventory on hand.
We do, and we're continuing to work with all the manufacturers to buy the latest and greatest. We have a very new fleet, the newest in the industry here in the United States. And so you have confidence in the reliability of the asset, right? We're not selling and we're not leasing out, 10, 15-year-old assets. They're brand new assets to deploy Again, really to differentiate ourselves from competitors, right? Having reliable,
Yeah.
having the optionality and the flexibility to customize a solution for each individual customer. Because as we all know, you've been to one airport, you've
Yes.
seen one airport.
Right.
There may be some common threads, but you've really seen something that is unique. It's similar with ground handlers and airlines. They all have their unique features.
Yeah.
And so be able to be customizable is really, I think, a strong suit of HiServe and something that's important to us as we build our customer base here in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, it again, I can see what the purpose that it would serve as someone who's been in that space before. De-icing, is that a part of it?
Yes,
You-
any asset on the airfield.
Okay. So you
We
would
have anything from a dolly
Okay.
to a de-icer.
Okay.
We can rent and we can lease on the long-term basis
Yeah.
because you don't have need for a de-icer during the
Right.
summer months, right? And
Yeah.
the cost of buying $1 million unit
Yeah.
is really a struggle. So let us be the solution for that part of the industry.
Again, I think, and especially, something like that, because I do see, like airports like ours and stuff, I think there's an Achilles heel, especially with de-icing equipment.
Mhm.
And usually, right, we have a new de-icing truck, and you're like, ew, did Paul McCartney buy that? but
I may regret telling that story.
no, I love that story. Yeah, I love Paul McCartney. I love the Beatles.
Yes.
No,
Who knew he would be so pivotal in my life?
Who
right?
knew? Who knew?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there was any celebrities that were pivotal in my timeline. There really probably wasn't. Um, you know,
Who have you met that you still sticks with you that you were excited to meet? Because mine is Paul McCartney, right? It was really pivotal to
It
me.
was pivotal,
Yeah,
yeah.
who would be that in your, not to turn the tables on
Not to
this,
turn
but
it.
you.
No, yeah, no, you should. I'm trying to think. Most of it was kind of like ad hoc, right? You're just because I worked line service for a while, like a lot of people when you start in the field in the career, right? And you run into somebody and you don't really, because you're not when you're in that role, right? Unlike a line, I've been in those before later in my career, but in the beginning of it, you're servicing an aircraft or something, right? And so usually the company you're working for is like, don't with anybody, right? Don't
Yes.
unless they engage with you, you do your job and you walk away. And so
Yes.
it kind of always created that dynamics. I don't know if there was anything that was pivotal, but I met Michael Jordan. I met
He's so gracious.
I didn't get much of an opportunity to really know. He was in and out. And but again, because of the role, right? I was servicing the aircraft.
Yeah.
But wasn't bad or anything. He just in and out. And that's a lot of that is convenient, right? I mean, I've met all the candidates, and however you look at the political spectrum, like Biden was nice to me. He was a nice person. And Obama was nice. Trump, I didn't meet directly. His pilots, there was a minor issue with his pilots, but it's interesting because a lot of times when you're in our job, right, it's the logistical aspect. And so sometimes by the time you're involved with it, especially as you get higher in your position, you're there because something has gone wrong or something's off to the side.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I've been fortunate. When I was in Daytona, I worked in Daytona, Florida for a while, and I worked for a fixed base operator there. And I got to meet all the race car drivers, which I don't know too much. I laughed. George, you met George in our office.
Yes.
He likes Indy. I say that's NASCAR, right? Just to mess with him. Big White Sox fan, George,
Yeah.
the insider. But he, I got to meet all the drivers, and some of the drivers were so nice, like Carl Edmonds, nicest man. And I think he flew a CRJ2, flew it himself. And then I won't say, but I met some who would refer to themselves in the third person. And they're like, I cannot drive. And they would say their name. Jeff Miller, cannot drive a Tahoe. Jeff Miller must drive a Mercedes. And when you hear somebody talking like that, dude, I didn't even set the car up. Your people set the car up. But to me, you become detached from reality if you think that's how anybody should talk to anybody in this world, like I'm just going to start referring to myself in third person more. But yeah, there hasn't been this pivotal celebrity probably moment for me.
I remember, and especially as a young girl who grew up on the south side of Chicago, when the Sox won the championship and they arrived back at Midway, the euphoria that not only took over the city, but I was so thrilled that I was out on the ramp, and I can remember the team coming down and high-fiving us all as they were getting off the plane. I mean, that was kind of a fantastic moment, not only in aviation, but also just as a city of Chicago, lifelong Sox fan.
No, I remember
holding the actual championship trophy, and just some great opportunities.
So it's interesting in life. So it was in San Jose, and it was the Stanley Cup. And so the Stanley Cup is, I guess, passed around.
Yes.
And the winners are put on it, right? So we had an incident downstairs on the baggage system, and I went down as part of the airport, and it had nothing to do with the Stanley Cup. It was something else. But we get down there, and there's the oversight inspection for TSA, right? And it was the Stanley Cup in a box. We're down there for something else, and you look over, and you're like, is that the Stanley Cup? Just sitting here? What? But it's the thing about aviation, right, is everybody everybody that comes into the airport stuff, people are like, oh, everybody in aviation is rich. It's like, well, no, people that are either, influential, they have money, but they get that wherever they get that from, whether it's being a Beatles or something else. What do? You fly, right? Mm-hmm. And you end up at the airport. And so it does give you an opportunity to meet a lot of cool people. I'll say, if I got to meet Paul McCartney, I'd be very excited about that.
Yes.
I have not gotten to meet Paul McCartney. And so maybe I'm just envious.
I haven't gotten to meet him again. It was one of those random acts that, they say the Lord has a plan for you, right? I was meant to be there and meant to meet him that day, that then changed the trajectory of my life.
No, it's interesting with, in our career fields, because you spend so much time around people of influence, and, people ask me all the time, and they're like, oh, so say the same thing. It's like, well, I say it often. I was like, if we do our job effectively, sometimes the ultimate compliment is people don't know we exist.
Right. You're right about that.
Because most of the time, unless it's like a green line, which is great. And again, kudos to those that they allow a green line when they come in. But sometimes it's just, they want to get in and out, right? Efficient.
Yeah. I think what we can do best for our communities, right, is make sure that those airports remain strong economic assets. Absolutely. Because a strong, high-functioning airport brings jobs, it brings development, it's the ripple effects throughout communities. And so, and the air, obviously the air service isn't that. I mean, you can get to anywhere in the world, from anywhere in Chicago. And really putting a face, right? All of us have connections of stories about, their first flight when they were a child, or those wonderful trips, and how aviation is just interwoven into all of our stories. As humans, it's a common connection. Yeah. Similar to sports, right? If you think about, people have this strong connection to whatever sport they feel passionate about, from tennis to football to baseball to everything else in between. But being able to talk about your experiences in travel and aviation, and if you're a pilot, or if you just enjoy to fly around the world, or the first trip that you took with your parents, the last trip you took with your parents, right? There's a connection there through aviation that is really unique, and something that those of us that work in it every day are really lucky and blessed to be part of.
And that's another thing. I'm going to go back to timeline you mentioned, but in 1997 you became commissioner. But what you've referenced when you came in the office, 1998 you got your pilot's license.
I did.
And flew into PWK?
That is correct. So I quickly realized, sitting in the rooms that I was sitting in, leading the airport, that number one, I was the only woman in the room. As I was sitting in rooms as the deputy commissioner at the airport, that having that perspective from both the FAA and the pilot perspective would be really helpful. And so I went and got my pilot's license so that I could be able to. That's my personality, right? If I didn't understand it, I'm curious, always learning, always curious, always wanting to know more. And I still feel like that today. Yeah. that's what I love about High Serve North America, right? GSC leasing was not part of what I was doing running the airport, but it's certainly adjacent to
Oh yeah.
what the activities, a successful operation at the airport. And so being able to leverage all of that experience into how do we support ground support equipment to all of the stakeholders across the country, because you can't move a plane without ground support equipment.
You can't.
And so it doesn't matter the size of the plane, but it doesn't matter whether it's,
Right.
a Gulfstream or it is, a Boeing 777. You need
Right.
ground support equipment in order to move that aircraft successfully. And so I'm excited to be able to leverage the experience that I had running the airport to now running a GSE leasing company.
No, kudos to identify that problem, because I would say people in our role, we all know it. It didn't strike to me like, oh, there should be a leasing option. That's readily available for people. But it does serve a purpose, because it is an issue exists out there. But in just going and getting your pilot's license, because I had a similar thought when I went to school. I went to an aviation school and I wanted to fly too. I just couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I got what I consider my first kind of airport job, not a grown up one. My first one would be Manistee, but when I got hired in Stockton, California, and you start going around and you're talking about badges and site areas and AOA, people that fly there, especially if there's a lot of general aviation pilots who are there. If you're not a pilot, you get it. This guy's get out of here. Got nothing to say to me. And so I always wanted to do it, but there was like some street cred maybe to be like, I get it. So to your point, you're like, oh,
I got my street cred.
Right. I
got my pilot's license.
Right.
Not that I would ever compare myself to the expertise that exists within the FAA or even within, senior pilots and organizations, but I think understanding their perspective was really helpful in negotiating with entities, in liaisoning with FAA or negotiating with airlines. Understanding the other person's perspective always helped me to inform solutions that I could offer, because I certainly had my perspective, but my father always told me you never win an argument if you don't understand the other person's perspective.
Right.
And so understanding their perspective was really helpful. And it also is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. It's very, it is.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. And even at this point, I think when you look at the population base, it's about 700,000 people that have pilot license in the U.S. of a country of 375 million.
Yes.
Roughly. So you're a small percentage of the population. And there is, it's kind of like in the job here, you could spend so much time in leasing and negotiations and just the day-to-day of running an airport that I'll pencil in a time just to go fly.
Yes.
So I can feel that connection back to it. And you do, you can understand the perspective better. And at least, because at the end of the day, you mentioned this earlier on about making decisions, and the reality of that is you're not going to give 100% of people happy this is not going to happen. But, again, we talked about before, going to the community members, talking to communities, when you're talking with your pilot base, you may not be flying a 777, but you understand it, right? If you were to that level of understanding of that aircraft, you wouldn't be the airport director. You would be the captain of a 777. And so I do think that there is this continuity between everything. And I love to see people in our roles that do it. I always say, I don't think you need to be a pilot to run an airport. However, I've probably geared myself mentally over the last several years more towards, I don't know if I'm completely there anymore. I do think that, when I talk to some airport directors, there's some amazing ones that don't fly or anything, but I also talk to some that don't fly, that have a very negative outlook of aviation. And I think those small percentage of people that get into roles like ours happen to just be at the right place at the right time, right? Oh, I want to work for a county or a city or whatever, and it doesn't matter if it's at downtown or it's at the airport. I could care less. And, when you hear that perspective, I think it gets lost. It's the decisions that we make are never lost on me in my day job, that people probably won't find them. Maybe, oh, why'd you do this? Okay, like building a new ramp or something. But, when you look at that component of aviation where you have the piston pilot, an aviation explorer, silver patrol. There's a lot of really good stories there. And we all, at least for me, like when I started, I couldn't afford it, but I could see, you know, somebody was like, hey, I fly, or they take you up. And I love a lot of people that have ability to still have those stories. But like in our case here, we built a new ramp for $2.6 million. And the truth of the math is that's 109 years to break even.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like the story. I like what we're doing. But if you bring people in and just say, hey, look, this is why private industry won't build you that ramp, right? Because the money's not there, but
that ramp was essential to the operations of the airport.
Well,
and to be done.
Yeah,
so that's why there are these government agencies that run the airport infrastructure, because it is critical infrastructure. Right. It is, and sometimes, I mean, you try to get the economics to work, right? Nobody walks up to a project and say, "Boy, I want to spend more money than I ever needed to spend."
Right.
But making sure that the cost benefit is there over the long term, and certainly for what is needed for your airport. No, I did hear you say that you have 7 flight schools on 9.
Don't cut 2 off.
9. So there's no reason, Jeff, that you're not exploring the opportunity to become a pilot if that's still something that's in your passion.
You mean like for a commercial pilot?
No, for you to become a pilot.
Oh, I fly.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Perfect.
I'm a pilot.
Great.
Yes. No, sorry. I couldn't.
I misunderstood.
No, I couldn't. No, because I said it weird. And that's probably 1, my Michigan accent, and 2, my ability just to word vomit stuff out. But I couldn't afford it when I was going to school. And so after I started working and got my career, I went and wanted to fly. And I actually fly out of this airport.
Oh, fantastic.
And so,
nothing like it, isn't it? To fly out of your own airport.
As a matter of fact, I'm in the process right now of purchasing a biplane.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes. And so that's part of everything you see here. And anybody that listens to this knows, and like, okay, Jeff, you want to be Snoopy? And I'm like, I would love to be Snoopy. If I could be Snoopy, that's all I need in life.
Yes.
But yeah, no, so when I fly out of here, I'll go like a city tour.
Nice.
I'll go see where Meg's used to be.
Fly down that corridor. Yes, exactly. And our beautiful skyline of the city of Chicago, right?
Yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
I have family or friends that come out, and that, that's where
you're the hero, right?
Yeah,
you get to do that. Yeah, for certain.
It's a beautiful flight, beautiful skyline.
Yes.
And it's nice we get to go down actually your airspace. So they changed the airspace 2 years ago down there a little bit. It's 2,300 feet out over Lake Michigan for the shelf for the approach and Midway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fine. Stay under it. I go in at like 1,900 underneath. I give myself a little space. So make anybody mad in the tower.
Yes.
And then roll through. And I'll usually end up stopping at our friends at Gary.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Our friends in Gary.
Yes.
But it allows you just to feel like you're a part of it. And I feel like it does give me perspective.
And don't you feel reset after you've had that flight? It can only be an hour or so, but boy, you come back to work, you land back at this beautiful airport of yours, and you're reset, you're recharged. There's something about it.
I love it. Do you still fly?
I unfortunately do not. So life got in the way of keeping it current.
So you told your husband that maybe when the kids are older, you would get back into flying?
I always thought that maybe when my children were teenagers, I might need to refresh my certification so that I could be that cool mom and have them engage with me, because I could fly them and their friends. But fortunately, I have wonderful, amazing children. I haven't had to pull that card out. So
that seems fair. No, I like with this and all this, as I'm getting longer in the tooth, getting to that point where I'm like, okay, what's next for me?
Yes.
You have a great idea. And it seemed like you have a great company, a great thought. For me, I went on a biplane ride with my niece, and it just happened. I'm walking past a little airport in Ohio, and one man show, the guy has a sign on the fence line, and he's like, "Oh, you want to go up 500 pounds in the front seat? 15-minute flight, $275. I can do that. I can be that guy.
Yes.
I can just fly around and give rides.
It wouldn't feel like work, would it? It's passion. It would really feel exciting.
It would be so much
Yes.
fun.
And how many exciting people would you meet through those journeys?
And
that could really fuel a few more episodes of this.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's part of it, right? I'm just going to throw the microphones in the back of it.
Exactly.
But I think that
Airplane confessions.
you're right. It'll be comedians in an airplane.
That's right,
Different, like Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And if somebody doesn't give me anything juicy, I won't land. Like, I want a confession. I want to hear all the details.
Buyers beware.
Exactly. But there's this, as you get, I don't know, for me, as I get longer in my career, I've been at, not to the size of your airport, but in my portfolio, San Jose was a larger facility, Pittsburgh. Um, and we talked about governing structures of airports. People ask about time, well, where are you going to go? What do you want to do? I'm happy where I am. I'm happy with what I'm doing. And if I'm honest, it's like the next step is probably not running an airport, right? Is what we just spoke about. And because you get later in your career, and I love seeing when you talk with younger people that like who were us at one point and standing in line and in our career, at least I'll say on my part, I've run into some really great people I would consider mentors, or at least people that help to kind of push you along. And then you've met a list of people that were not helpful. And I never want to be the not helpful. You know what I mean? And so
I think everyone's leadership style is informed by the people that mentor them positively, but also by people that they've worked with and around that you want to try to consciously avoid and be very intentional about that. But I think it's also, you're in a great position because you're in an airport that is dynamic. It's in obviously the greatest part of the country.
I agree with that.
In the Chicago area. But also it allows the complexities, right? That there's never a day that looks the same. And I think that the general public might not understand that, right? When you're running an airport, you may have your idea of what your day is going to be like, but the world has other aspirations sometimes, and they direct you elsewhere. And I love that dynamic, challenging environment. It was the adrenaline that fueled me when I was running an airport, and I'm sure it's still doing that for you too.
It absolutely is, and I think when you find yourself around the right team and you're like, yeah, this is where I want to be. And that's how I felt here. Now, the reality of the compliment that I gave to you, because I mean it, is I say it in my role, I have to keep 19 people happy between all the electeds and the appointed officials. The reality is at some point that's probably not going to be reality. And so, and I think there's something good about, new people coming in, new ideas, stuff like that. And the reality, especially of this type of place that's so small, if there's upward movement, it means that, I can't, there's a propeller off camera. You can see it, that has 3 names on it. Those are the previous airport directors to me. It's kind of a tombstone. I'm living with my tombstone. Someday my name will be on it in this office.
And your legacy will live on.
It will live on that propeller.
Well, and on the infrastructure that exists at this airport and what you've done to invest. And so I feel like that's what we all do, right? We want to make sure that, you live to work, not work to live. And so you want to make sure that your legacy that you've left in aviation, whether it's the physical infrastructure, the airport, or the people that you've mentored, or the business deals that you've been able to transact have all been positive and so you will do that not only on that propeller blade, but also within the airport infrastructure here.
Oh yeah. And if they think that's staying, it's coming on my arm. I go, it's just going to fit in the back of the biplane, but I need an extra prop. And I did want to touch on this before I let you go, because I enjoyed immensely talking to you.
I am as well, Jeff.
Thank you. But before we started the podcast, you mentioned privatization. And I know from what you said, and I remember this after you mentioned it with Midway and going down that road. And obviously people in our industry know of it, kind of similar to the conversation with ground service equipment, and where you mentioned it's, obviously more of an idea that's rapidly available like Europe. The same, I think, with privatization or private companies running airports. The United States, St. Louis is probably the most recent example. I have my own opinions of why, but it's never come to fruition. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as like just generally, are you positive of it? Do you think it's a good idea to go down, or do you see where it's the pitfalls of where it's been stopped at least in the way the United States structures airports?
So I think what's interesting about the United States is that there's different governance structures across the country. You have those that are owned and run by government agencies, quasi-government agencies, and even, the smaller airports, even by private entities. And so you really have a spectrum of options, which means that you have a spectrum of solutions. And so I don't know that privatization, we tried it twice in Chicago, and it was absolutely exhilarating to be part of those teams that were helping support that initiative. And I learned a lot during that process. I had never been through a privatization process. And so I was happy to have a seat on the bus, observing what happened and see how the transactions were being developed. And I think we put together a very responsible transaction, but it was also the responsible decision that the transactions didn't close. And so that sometimes you go through the deal development process and you don't end up with a deal, but it was still a good experience. And that was certainly my experience with the privatization efforts at Midway. I think that airports are huge economic assets for their communities. And, the effective and efficient management of those airports is paramount. How it's structured and how it's governed is really left up for those local entities to decide versus for me to opine, because what works in one airport might not work. What works in Europe may not work here in the United States. And so, but being aware, I think, is the most important thing, that there are options out there. And again, going back to understanding other perspectives, it's really about understanding what's beneficial about those perspectives. Why does it work in Europe, or maybe why doesn't it work in some cases in Europe? And really, what benefit would it add? What value would it add to airports here in the United States? I'm out of the airport management business, so I won't opine about whether or not it makes sense or whether things should be further explored. I would just tell you my personal experience being on the team that evaluated these transactions for the city of Chicago. I'm very grateful for that opportunity, because I learned a tremendous amount about a different aspect of airport management and about airport finances and regulatory structure that I did not have exposure to. And so I'm grateful for that experience, because it broadened my own personal and professional lens by which I ran the airport. And it informed then, as we renegotiated airport use agreements with our airline partners post privatization evaluation, it informed some of those decisions and really gave additional knowledge that I would not have otherwise had the opportunity. So that's really what I was telling you. I feel so blessed that I was able to grow my career in aviation here in Chicago. It's because Chicago has two dynamic airports that offered these wonderful challenges that I was able to get the exposure to and learn from, whether it was the terminal development program, whether it was the privatization efforts, whether it was capital development programs, or just, airport negotiations, airport operations and maintenance, all of the aspects that I was able to get exposure to during my time at tenure with the state of Chicago. I'm forever grateful. But I also feel like that's really led me to where I am today and exploring, ground support equipment leasing and really being able to bring that change to the industry, really looking at things from a different lens, and it's shifting the paradigm as to how airports, airlines, and ground handlers, view their ground support equipment and how we can be their partner.
Again, not just people in my network that, are at these airports. I see the benefit of the ground service side to it. And with the privatization, it's an interesting, you hear people passionate kind of either way. And just the reality, good or bad, of how airports were developed in the United States. There's some good protections in there, I think, that some of our European airports don't necessarily are blessed to have. There's also a lot of red tape, and I think that's generally where, when you see a structure of like an authority or commission, when you hear people kind of preference that, it's because you kind of operate a little more like a business, which kind of, in my mind, maybe we're meeting somewhere in the middle between privatization completely and, full government. I don't know. But it's an interesting case. And I'm sure another airport will get brought up somewhere else where there'll be another study. And who knows, maybe at some point, it can make sense. I don't know at this point, but I know Branson, Missouri, I think, is the only airport that I was aware of that was completely funded without federal funds when they initially built it, when they built a new airport in Branson. And they didn't take on any federal grants for anything. And so I don't know if that's changed in the last, might be 20 years, 15 years since that's how they built that airport. But I do know at the time it was, at least in my own mind, kind of the probably the only example of a commercial airport that had some form of privatization, because there wasn't government control in it. But one out of 490 some commercial airports in the United States. But so rather than keep you here all day, because I could do that, at least verbally, I would love to do that. But what's on the horizon for you? To stay in Chicago? Is that the plan for you now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're born and raised here in Chicago. Our roots are here. And I'm really excited, though, that I'm still involved in aviation with a dynamic company that really wants to push growth and additional capacity, which aligns very much with how I see the world. Like, let's try to do things that change the paradigm, make us more efficient, more effective. And ground support equipment leasing is a way to do that for partners across the industry. And so I'm excited to partner with my dynamic team at HiServe North America. Matt Weitzel is our VP of Sales. Matt is an industry veteran that brings over 20 years of experience. David Farias, Director of Sales. He comes from JetBlue and Swissport. Just industry experts which is the great thing about starting your own business. Well, starting your own business, you get to pull together the team of people that you know that have been leaders and have impressed you throughout your career. And so I'm really excited that Matt, David, and I are able to lead HiServe into North America. So if your listeners have any need for ground support equipment, reach out.
They very well might. There's a lot of airport managers that tune in either just to make fun of me or maybe gather something from a guest, which is probably the better thing for them to do. But no, that's I will say, because my day job, our airport is turning 100, so I had to do a little research into Chicago. We beat you by a year.
I know. 1
year, sorry.
I know, it's okay.
Technically, we're not in Chicago proper, but that's why we say Chicagoland.
Yeah,
it's all Chicago, really. So for us, we have a big, you're welcome to call. 227. We have a Ford Tri motor here, B25, L39s, the couple DC3s. Because actually, I found a picture in this cabinet right here. From 1936 on this airport, American Airlines running mail from public Achilles Air LA. Which most of all of our airports you see this explosion in the 1920s.
Yes.
Mail delivery. But it was a lot of fun digging into the history and where, I knew O'Hare wasn't really, it was like 56, 1950 somewhere when O'Hare opened, but I was like, well, Midway's close. We're going to dig into this a little bit.
Yes.
And so you guys, well, I'm sure you'll celebrate, since you're not there from afar, for your 100th year coming up next year. I'm assuming they got some activities planned.
I'm certain the city doesn't miss a milestone to celebrate.
Why would you? It's a good milestone.
And congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you.
100 years is a big milestone to celebrate. And so I'm glad you're bringing out all of those vintage aircraft to really, appreciate the history, because if we're not talking about it, people aren't learning from it. And so
right. Well, and I often say too, I fly recreationally at this airport, but like when I was in LA, I'm at one of your airports, I fly commercially. And we all, to the point you made really early on in this podcast, we're all part of the system. And the reality is people are going to learn to fly at Midway or O'Hare. They're going to learn to fly at a PWK style airport.
Yes.
So it is, a system. And Michael McMurray and everybody over there's always been so gracious with their time. Jamie Reed, when she was there, when I got in, would allow us to, use some of your power as CDA to help push stuff through for all airports collectively in the state. So thank you for that and your team, because it has allowed us to have a better seat at the table, because when O'Hare and Midway are in alliance with you, it goes further. So it's been a great partnership, I think, with all the airports, and I love seeing that. And I love seeing you in your new role. And again, I think that helps. In my mind, I'm thinking about these airports that can really help from what you're offering. And in my past experience, we could have gone down that avenue as well. So,
well, thank you for the time today. I just enjoyed spending this hour visiting with you. And
it's such a pleasure.
It's such a great industry that we get to be part of. And it's really about these connections and these relationships that are really special about what a special part of the aviation.
Well, Erin, thank you for being on Destination Aviation, and we'll see you down the runway.
See you down the runway.